Now they care? The media are reporting on the passing of Daniel Peterson-English, and whilst you may not know the name, you'll recognise this footage. That was September 2021. The media were busy demonising anti-lockdown protesters, and on social media it was fashionable to call for us to be locked up in concentration camps or even shot. I've received direct reports from former Victoria Police officers telling me that during the turbulent final few months of these protests, when Victoria Police violence was at its height, that as they would be bussed in towards the city for yet another protest, they would get a pep talk from a senior member standing at the front of the bus, reminding them that they were free to use whatever force they felt necessary, and that Victoria Police would support them in the aftermath of that use of force. One officer, who has unfortunately wanted to remain anonymous, if there are any VicPol officers willing to go public with this, then please reach out to me. I'd be very interested to get your interview. But one officer said to me that they felt like they were being given a license to kill. Now that is, to be clear, the subjective opinion of one officer who I unfortunately cannot interview publicly, so it doesn't carry much weight, I acknowledge that. Except for the fact that Victoria Police absolutely behaved as though they really did think they had a license to, at a minimum, inflict life-threatening injuries without fear of consequences. So this anonymous and subjective opinion of that officer is absolutely consistent with the evidence at hand, and yet, as far as I'm aware, not one single officer has been held accountable for any of the many excessively violent assaults that they carried out during that period of time. Who can forget the lady in red? Just one of the assaults that I cover in my multi-award-winning documentary Battleground Melbourne. A 70-year-old woman, tired from running away from the police and their violence, goes to give herself up and is thrown to the ground and pepper sprayed in the face by two officers twice her size. One of whom, by the way, was the senior officer on the scene. So this was the standard, the example that he was setting for his officers to follow. Consequences? Zero, of course. Who can forget the shooting of Matt Lawson? This footage again from my documentary Battleground Melbourne. Matt was a known peacemaker, not a troublemaker. And when he questioned the police on why they were escalating their violence, why are you bringing pepperball guns and rubber bullet guns to use against unarmed Victorians who are standing up for their human rights? The Victoria Police answered the question by showing him what the weapons were for, by shooting him with them. Matt became the first person to be shot by a rubber bullet during this anti-lockdown protest era, and he needed surgery and had internal organs removed. Such was the devastating impact, literally, of being shot with a rubber bullet at such close range. Were there consequences for the Victoria Police officers who gave the orders or the ones who followed the orders? Ha! Don't be silly. These are just two of many, many examples. It became routine for Victoria Police to hospitalise protesters, bringing batons and rubber bullets where us protesters brought placards and chants. And who can of course forget the firing squad, formed by Victoria Police officers who were only too willing to join in and support Daniel Andrews' human rights violations, and they lined up to shoot rubber bullets at unarmed protesters at the Shrine of Remembrance. So much for lest we forget. It seems that we have very much forgotten the freedoms and the human rights that our diggers fought for, and that we built that shrine to remember. But all of that we knew already. Victoria Police were willing thugs for a premier-turned-tyrant. That is obvious and on the record. But what has been revealed by the passing of Daniel Peterson-English is the two-faced hypocrisy of the media. My name is Topher, this is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around you. I am 100% viewer supported, so please head over to Good People Break Bad Laws and check out my best-selling books about civil disobedience, something which I can speak about with authority after being one of the people on the front lines of the protests against the COVID lockdowns in Melbourne, Australia, as we became the most locked down city in the world. There's also my DVD of Battleground Melbourne, which has won 14 awards around the world and tells the story of the courageous people who stood up for human rights against Victoria Police during that Battleground Melbourne era. And there's t-shirts and there's hoodies. Thank you for your support and helping me to keep doing what I do, which is bringing you stories that the MSM won't. And sadly, today the struggling mainstream media are the story, because they are reporting on the death of Daniel Peterson-English and trying to ignore the fact that it was them, the mainstream media, that helped to whip up the atmosphere of fear, that fear-driven frenzy that made it possible for Victoria Police to get away with their violent crimes, including their violent assault against Daniel. It was the mainstream media who are now reporting with great sadness the death of Daniel, who called all of us anti-vaxxers, COVID deniers. They accused us of being violent when we were the ones being attacked by Victoria Police. They said we were disrespecting the Shrine of Remembrance when we were standing up for the freedoms that our Anzacs fought for against a government and police force who were trashing the legacy of our Anzacs. The media said that we were killing Grandma, that we were crazy conspiracy theorists, and that our claims about human rights violations were completely unfounded. Well, now we know, and I can say on YouTube without getting censored because everyone acknowledges that this is the truth, I can say that the mRNA jab experiment was neither safe nor effective. I can say that COVID wasn't that bad of a flu and was certainly within the bounds of severity of other flus that we've had in my lifetime. I can say that human rights were most certainly violated by Daniel Andrews and by Victoria Police, and that both the Victorian Ombudsman Deborah Glass and the Australian Human Rights Commissioner agree with me, belatedly, on that point. I can say that the conspiracy theorists were right more often than the experts, and I can say that Victoria Police brought infinitely more violence to the protests than the protesters did, and I can say that the media have blood on their hands because they refused to say any of those things back when it might have made a difference. And I find it absolutely repugnant that the media now, at the passing of Daniel Peterson-English, are trying to pretend that they care about him, when that very same media are in part responsible for what happened to him, because the police did indeed have a license to kill, not just from Premier Daniel Andrews and their chain of command, but also from the media. Now, yes, at the time, the media reported on the assault on Daniel, and they said they were shocked. Oh, it was a shocking assault on Daniel. Because even for them, this assault did seem pretty extreme. But they quickly forgot and moved on, condemning in the process the anti-lockdown protesters and providing cover for the ongoing police violence that continued to put lives at risk. Thanks to the media atmosphere, the police felt at liberty just days after that sling tackle to roll out armoured cars, to assault people on the streets, beating them with their rifles, and shooting rubber bullets, firing squad style, at unarmed Victorians. Such was the limp media response to this act of recklessness by Acting Sergeant Beau Barrett, which could easily have resulted in the immediate death of Daniel. Their shock in the media was so paper thin that Victoria Police officers had no hesitation escalating their violence further in the days that followed, engaging in countless other acts of reckless, violent assault against unarmed Victorians. The media did this. The media betrayed us. They threw us to the wolves when we most needed them to speak truth to power. And years later, they want to bring out the violins for the passing of Daniel Peterson-English? Spare me. The officer who assaulted Daniel got off pretty much scot-free. He was suspended without pay while his violent attack was investigated, but in January 2023, a magistrate threw the charges out, stating, laughably in my opinion, that a jury could not possibly conclude that Beau Barrett had acted unlawfully. I think that magistrate shouldn't presume to know what a jury would find. Let's not forget that Victoria has king hit laws, where a single strike attack that leads to someone's death has a minimum sentence of 10 years non-parole, provided, of course, that the victim dies. Now, Daniel didn't die as a result of this attack on him, but it is a miracle that he didn't. This was a life-threatening king hit attack, and the injuries and trauma that Daniel suffered stayed with him for the rest of his sadly shortened life. If you or I did what Victoria Police did that day, what Sergeant Beau Barrett did that day, we would be in prison. If you or I said about our fellow Victorians what the media said about us, the protesters, whipping up an atmosphere of fear and providing cover and making excuses for these kinds of violent assaults, then we would be charged with incitement. But none of the police officers responsible for any of the violent and unprovoked assaults of the battleground era have been held to account, nor has the police commissioner, who allowed this culture of violence in his organisation, nor has the premier, who weaponised and politicised Victoria Police to enforce his human rights violations, and nor have the media, who, far from speaking truth to power and standing up for what was right, became a political mouthpiece and provided cover for some of the most despicable acts of state-sanctioned violence that Victoria has seen in a generation. Can you do me a favour? Can you go online and find any and every post by any mainstream media outlet reporting on the passing of Daniel Peterson-English, and can you get into the comments and ask those media outlets, ask those journalists, where the hell were you at the time? Why did you provide cover so Victoria Police could get away with this assault on Daniel? Why did you provide cover for Victoria Police so they felt emboldened to even make such a shocking assault in the first place, and then so safe even after that assault went viral that they continued to escalate their violence against the protesters? Now, don't get into their comments because you think the journalists will care or the MSM outlets will care. They won't. Most of them are way too far gone. Do it so that your fellow Victorians and fellow Australians will see it, and they will know that they are not alone in their disgust for the mainstream media. Do it so that others can be awakened to the fact that something is deeply wrong in our country and in our media landscape. When the police are free to nearly kill people, and magistrates say, oh, nothing to see here, they couldn't possibly be found to have acted unlawfully by a jury, and the media run cover for them, we are in a bad way. I'm afraid the hour in Australia is later than we think. Now, I don't think it's too late, but I think it's later than we think. Daniel Peterson-English's life was a complicated one and tragic in many ways. He faced mental health challenges, which sometimes he handled well and sometimes he didn't. But nothing he did on that day deserved the life-threatening assault that he suffered. And sadly, now, a few years later, he has passed away without so much as an apology from Beau Barrett, who attacked him, from Victoria Police, who gave Beau Barrett the license to kill, or from the media, who egged them all on. Stories like this are exactly why I do what I do and why I refuse to accept that it's all in the past and we should all just move on from the COVID era. No. Crimes were committed, and people are living and dying with the consequences of those crimes. And we owe it to them never to stop pursuing the criminals and doing all that we can to hold them to account. That means Daniel Andrews. That means Victoria Police, from the leadership, the commissioners, to the individual officers. And it certainly means the media. Don't let the media get away with pretending that now all of a sudden they care about Daniel. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I bring you the stories and perspectives that the mainstream media won't. I don't have any sponsors or advertisers for pretty obvious reasons. I'm a little too spicy. So I'd love for you to support my work by heading over to goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com and checking out my books about civil disobedience, which is Good People Break Bad Laws, all about civil disobedience in the modern age, and Good Christians Break Bad Laws, which is about the theology of civil disobedience and why Christians should be among the first to stand up to government when it oversteps its God-given boundaries, as well as the DVD of my documentary Battleground Melbourne. Now, you can watch this for free online at battlegroundmelbourne.com. When I made this documentary, I made it clear that this isn't my story. This isn't my documentary. Actually, it's the story of many brave and amazing people who shone brightly in dark times. I had the privilege of being the storyteller, the director, but I didn't write it. It was written by the people that stood up for what was right when our government went badly, badly wrong. So I promised that I would make that documentary available for free online for as long as I possibly could, and that is exactly what I've done and continue to do. So you can watch it for free at battlegroundmelbourne.com. But if you'd like a DVD to put on your shelf to help make sure that this documentary is never able to be taken down and sent down the memory hole, and also you'll be supporting me in the process, then head over to goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com and get a copy of Battleground Melbourne on DVD, or get one of my books or my t-shirts, my hoodies, or more. And you will, of course, be helping me to keep bringing you stories like this one. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Make sure that you don't miss a story. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, ring the bell so that you get notifications. And as always, stay free.